It all happened so fast, I had no time to try to break away from the other mares. The men panicked us all with their shouting, and the leather whips cracking over our heads and stinging our backs. All three of us ran outside. The sky was paling to gray-blue, the eastern horizon turning gold. We could just see the edge of the forest and the horsemen riding towards us. For an instant I thought it was my father and his men, and I was joyous because the men leading the others up the hill rode tall and straight. Then I realized that though he might be someone's father, he was not mine. "Run!" I shouted. "Run home!" I hitched my lean up above my knees and sprinted for my house, glancing back to see Bevan and Garak flying over the ground in the opposite direction, their bare legs flashing. I veered to pass behind the old rath, hiding myself as the man galloped closer. My chest began to ache, but I did not stop. I managed to reach our door and found my mother frantic and frightened for me. "Hide yourself," she called. I shook my head, too winded to speak, but she didn't see me. She was already running for the rath, convinced, I suppose, that she might manage to save a horse or two from the raiders. I could hear shouts as the battle began. It would be short and easy for the raiders, like pushing children out of the way. There wasn't anyone to defend us, really, only old men and little boys. I heard barking, but knew that my father and the other men had taken the hunting hounds with them as well. Even our dogs were puppies or lame with age. Shouting at my mother, I followed her back towards the raft, and finally caught up, dragging her with me to hide beneath the low oak branches as the raiders thundered towards us. Whether they saw us or not, I will never know. I suppose they didn't care. They were after the horses. We crouched there, our arms locked together, both of us trembling as the strangers opened the gates and rode inside, herding the mares at a gallop back in the direction they had come from. Others were riding hard behind our 4 dry dairy cows, and they pounded past us, all of them whooping and cheering as they rode back to wherever they had come from. The sun was rising. They rode straight toward it. Were they from the east somewhere, then? I longed for my father to come home, to be home. He would ride after these men and get the gray mare back. When the sun rose and shone on our faces, it found us pale and frightened. My mother shook herself once the raiders were long and gone, and obviously not coming back. She looked at me. "Come, we have work to do. Hold your head up." We walked from house to house. Most were all right. One old man had been hurt. We found him in the woods, waiting for help to come. Magnus was missing too for a few hours, but then we found him. He had crawled into a woodpile, and the logs had shifted and trapped him. He was scared but safe. I cried and hugged him close when they got him out. We found the bay mare at the edge of the woods. Her foal was limping with her, but not too badly. Somehow she had managed to drop back between the riders' whips when her foal could not keep up. We brought her back up the hill and put her and their foal inside the raft. But Bevan, my sweet almost sister Bevan, was gone, just gone. No one had seen her captured. No one knew if she had been hurt and lay in the woods somewhere, or if she had been carried off. I could not stop crying for her, praying to all the old gods and all the saints that she was not badly hurt, not dead, and that if she had been captured she would get away and come back to us. Bevan's mother was calm because her other children needed her to be calm. I could see the agony in her eyes, though. We walked through the woods close enough together to touch hands, calling, looking beneath budding plum thickets. By evening my mother called a halt to the searching. Garak and I cried together. We were where no one could see us, so our sorrow would not hurt Bevan's family more than they already hurt. While there was still light, we all kept going from one house to the next, even though there was nothing new to tell. We just walked one way, then back, Garak and I holding hands in our misery, following our mothers. She was limping a little. She had twisted her ankle running. Little Magnus's and Garak's older brothers had tried to fight and had been hurt, but not badly. Their cuts and bruises were no worse than they sometimes gave one another. They were all very proud that they had tried to protect our tooth. I could hear their tales of battle growing with each telling. Later, when I could think past Bevan's disappearance for a moment, I mourned the loss of the mares. I prayed to the saints and old gods that they would be treated well, their fowls treated kindly, raised to trust. And the gray mare, with her gentle spirit and patience, was the subject of many of my pleadings. She had loved me, I thought. I knew I had loved her. I had been so excited to see her foal. The terrible day passed in a blur of tears. I wept for Bevan, for myself, missing her laughter, her smiles, and the way she wrinkled her nose when she was annoyed. Everything about her was clear to me. Now that she was gone, Garrick and I sat close together after the search, understanding each other's misery perfectly, and later off by myself I wept for the gray mare. That evening my mother shook me by my shoulders and told me to stop weeping. "We are lucky," she said, her voice sharp. "You had never seen a raid until today, and you are a rising 10. In the old days you'd have seen 20 by now." I nodded slowly. I knew it was true. All the old people told stories they had heard as children, and most of them were about raids and tooths destroyed, then rebuilt, and about bigger wars. My mother reached to push my hair out of my face. "Laura, we have much to be thankful for. The raiders did not find the big herd of cattle. The boys had them off in the lower fields to graze. They did not bother the boys chasing pigs in the woods, or steal our chickens, or kill our dogs. They did not burn our houses." She put her hands on her hips. "We will not starve, and captives are rarely killed now. It's not like the tales the men tell of the old times. Your father is a warrior other men fear. For that reason she will likely not be harmed, just held. Be thankful for that." I nodded and squared my shoulders. She handed me a basket of calming herbs to take to Bevan's mother. I tried to walk tall, to keep from crying. I passed Fallen at the bottom of our hill, and she barely nodded at me, striding off on some errand of her own. She was in a fury over the raid, talking to everyone about how my father would make the thieves pay dearly. She had spent a long time pacing in circles, shaking her fist in the direction the raiders had gone. I had left her alone. Everyone did. "Will they come back?" I asked my mother that first night, once everyone except Garrick had gone home, to make what small meals they could from their scanty stores. She shook her head. They had a long way to ride. Only fools rob close neighbors. Garrick took a breath. I looked into their faces as carefully as I could. I knew none of them. My mother was nodding. "None looked like anyone I know." I blinked. Garrick was right. The old Klaus were tall and thin. Most had ice blue eyes. We were shorter and heavier, almost all of us with straight brown hair. Bevan's red tangle was a rarity among us. If these raiders had come from any family we knew, we would have recognized them. Even though my mother reassured everyone and sent boys to 3 nearby Tootha to raise the watch for raiders, I don't think anyone slept that night. I know I did not. I woke next morning in the dark and lay still, my eyes filling with tears over Bevan. What work could I do without my dear friend? How could I live without ever again hearing her laughter? "Do not assume the worst," my mother said softly in the darkness. Had she been awake all night? "Bevan might manage to come back to us," she added. "If not, she might marry in the new place." She trailed off, and I knew she was thinking exactly what I was thinking. Tally. I felt terrible. I had been so lost in my own hurt and worry that I hadn't once given his a thought. I forced myself to rise and wash my face in the yard basin. I touched the little brooch pinned on the underside of my brat. What princess of the old times had worn it? How many cattle raids had she survived? The warring had been even worse long ago, my mother had said. The first terrible morning after the raid, I went inside the rath and talked to the bay mare. Her foal was standing steadier, and I was glad, but my heart was heavy. No one sang that morning or whistled. Our whole tooth was silent. Garrick and I, side by side in the dawn dark on our way to milk, we held hands. It would have been Bevan's turn that day.